So, any of my students will be able to tell you that I am a firm believer in the 3 pillars of fence, and that is the pillar of footwork, balance, and sword work. In order to be a well-rounded swordsman, in order to truly become that master swordsman, you have to be a master of all 3 pillars. Now, one of the things that I get a lot of comments about and a lot of questions is the way that I move. I use one of 2 different stances. I call the 90 degrees, whereby my feet are aligned at a 90-degree angle, and then what I call the 45 degrees. Each one of them has their strengths and specific purpose, and we're going to cover that today. So of the 2 stances that I use, the 90 and the 45, I use the 90-degree stance the least. Now that's not because it is any less useful, but because of the fact that it has a very good purpose when it comes to terrain that is uncertain, whether you're talking about because it's wet grass or gravel, maybe it's a little muddy. Whatever the case may be, usually I'm using that 90-degree stance outdoors when the terrain has the most chance of being uncertain for some reason. Now, in that 90-degree stance, as mentioned earlier, my heels are in a line and they are facing a line towards my opponent. But that back foot in that 90-degree stance is flat to the ground. This provides for the greatest surface area of my foot to be on the ground at all times, and therefore provides for the maximum amount of traction available. So the 45-degree stance is a little bit different in that, let's say you were going to be fighting, setting up your feet as though you were going to be fighting in a 90-degree stance. Then just take that back heel, turn it out 45 degrees, and now you're standing in what I prefer most often is my stance whenever I'm fencing. Now granted, this is when you're in an ideal traction situation, which you're pretty much going to have in almost every situation where the tournament is indoors. But the purpose behind the 45-degree stance is that it allows me to stay very mobile and very quick. But even more importantly, it allows me an element of deception in the amount of reach that I have. As Sun Tzu wisely once said a few thousand years ago, all warfare is based on deception. As such, anytime you can withhold information from your opponent, that is a potential advantage that you can put to good use. The advantage of the 45-degree stance for me is that when I need extra range, I can flex at the ankle and roll up onto the ball of the foot, thereby extending the reach of my standard lunge. But if I need even more reach than that, I can get it by turning on the ball of the foot and extending overall my lunge reach by as much as 16 inches. Now, I don't think I have to tell you exactly how much of an advantage that could be against an opponent who either A, doesn't know you have that kind of reach, or B, forgets it for even a moment. Like most things in life, and in pretty much every technique in fencing, good balance is key to utilizing this technique in your own footwork. Before you try applying this to your own fencing, please make sure that you have practiced it thoroughly, and if you do not yet have a solid grounding in good balance, then don't try this at all. If you do, you're going to end up throwing yourself into a high-speed lunge that's going to throw you off balance, and you're going to be open for a riposte that you can do nothing about. I have found that it is highly unwise to move laterally within range of your opponent if you do not first have control of their sword. If you decide to do otherwise, you can expect this to be the result. Notice how my opponent, when they started that step to the side, I immediately launched into an attack against them, and that is because your defense is fully made up of 50% of what you do with the sword and 50% of what you do with your feet. If you're caught in the middle of a step within range of your opponent, you have no mobility left to you. All you've got is what's left with the sword. And unfortunately, with 50% of your defense gone, you are 50% easier to hit. So any of you who have ever met me understand that I'm built like a rail, and my particular physique is ideally suited to using the 45-degree stance. Now, not all of my students, however, are built as I am, and something that we came to discover is that they had difficulty when using the 45-degree stance during their recovery out of a lunge. When they were doing that at high speed, it was throwing them off balance. So what I found was this small modification actually corrected that and kept them on their balance during the recovery. So for that particular situation, what you want to do is, instead of putting your heels in a line toward your opponent, what you want to do is separate your feet, your heels, on either side of that center line by an inch or two. And what that will do is it will open up your footwork and it will keep you on balance when you're doing those high-speed recoveries. Special thanks to all of my Patreon supporters, and in particular Pat Haley, who was our most recent subscriber. It's because of folks like you that we are going to make Castle Tiger a reality and make this a truly historic place. As always, if you have any questions on anything that you have seen in this video, feel free to reach out to me on Facebook. You can also reach out to me on the comment section here on the YouTube channel. But until then, I look forward to seeing you all in the tournament circuit.